who are we? CCLA difference what? Difference makers.
All right, it is 10:15. We're going to go ahead and get started because for our last hour of sessions of our Summit 25, I have about 3 hours of content planned for you. So we're going to hit the ground running and see what we can get through. If you are in person, on your table, you should have a folder with your materials in it, some Post-its, and an index card. You will need something to write with. Let me know if you need that. If you are joining us virtually, welcome. Charlotta is putting in the chat your resources. You can also access the Google folder with all of the resources at bit.ly CCLA Engage. If you are a digital person, there's also a digital note catcher there as well. My name is Karen Eaton. I work at the Contra Costa County Office of Education. I know that the program said Karen Eaton and Kristen Northrup. Fortunately for Kristen, unfortunately for me, she received a position and accepted a position at Sacramento County Office of Education and was not able to be here today. So you are here. I appreciate you coming to this last session. I hope that you have gotten a plethora of knowledge and information over the last 2 days. Just so that I know who's in the room, if you are a classroom teacher, can you raise your hand? If you're a site or district administrator, okay? If you're a county office person, if you are a support staff or paraprofessional, anybody I missed? Oh, okay, a mentor coach, great. Instructional specialist coach, teacher on special assignment, something like that. Fantastic. Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, as we get situated here today, what I'd like you to do is, if you are in person, you're going to grab at least 4 Post-its from your stack of Post-its in the middle. If you are virtually joining us online, you should have access to a session activity slide deck, and you are going to be looking at slides 3 through 6 right now, and you will see some virtual Post-its on those slides to participate in this activity. What I'd like you to do is we're going to take about 4 minutes to think about these 4 questions. What does student engagement mean to you? What engages you as a learner? You can list these things out, does not have to be a complete sentence. When do you find it challenging to stay engaged? And what is the most challenging thing about student engagement? Okay, so I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to think about those things. These questions are also on your note catcher if you need to see them a little bit more closely. And in case I forgot to mention it, one answer goes on one Post-it. You have about 30 more seconds. All right. As we're finishing up, I'm going to give you the directions and tell you what we're going to do. You are going to, if you are in person, you are going to find the questions around the room. There are 4 posters for you to visit. And if you are virtual, you already have yours on the correct poster. So the in person people, you are going to partner up and walk around to each of the posters after you get your post-its up. And I want you to read what your colleagues have written down, reflect on it. You're going to get an opportunity to think about any similarities, any differences, or any surprises, and you can jot those down on your note catcher as you go. If you are a virtual participant, I'm going to invite you to scroll through slides 3 through 6 on your activity slide deck and read what your colleagues have written down and jot down any similarities, differences, and surprises either in the chat or on your note catcher as well. So you're going to have just about 3 minutes. It's not an awful long period of time. I'm going to get you an opportunity to put your post-its up first and then give you about 3 minutes to stroll around and see what people have written. Any questions? What questions do you have? Fantastic. I invite you to introduce yourself if you don't know your new partner. All right, virtual participants, I hope you are getting an opportunity to scroll through and notice any similarities or differences or surprises on those charts. We have about 1 more minute. Once you have been able to visit all 4 posters in person, feel free to find your spot and jot down anything you noticed in your note catcher. About 10 more seconds. I'm gonna ask you to head back to your seat. Great. Thank you so much. This activity that we just did is called Chalkboard Splash. And when you have access to our slide deck, you will see that um, after each activity, there's what's called a facilitation debrief slide. So in just a minute, I'm going to share some of our targets and goals for today. But just to let you know, the steps for each activity that we're going to participate in are here today in case you decide in your sphere, whether it's in your classroom, whether you're a teacher on special assignment that provides professional learning, or a site or district administrator. If you're looking on how to facilitate one of these activities, it will be there. I'm not going to read those slides to you, but just to know that they're there in case you want to revisit the activity. All right. Can anybody share out something they noticed, either a similarity, a difference, a surprise? If you are online, please feel free to drop it in the chat and Charlotta will let us know. But anybody in person, something you noticed going around the room, similarities? Okay, so multiple ways, multiple modalities to present things. Great, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Joseph. Yes, turkey paste. I love that. That's what we're going to be doing today. So great. Thank you. Anything in the chat, Charlotta? Nope. Okay. Fantastic. Then we are just going to keep moving forward. So just to let you know, I'm sure that you've heard this all today, but we are super excited to be part of a great collaborative across the state with the CCLA grant. And we work as one of the regional hub partners with all of these fantastic county offices of education. So today's activities that we're going to be participating in, I'm going to be introducing you or reacquainting you because you might have already heard it in one of the sessions earlier about a continuum of engagement that represents how teachers think about engagement. We're going to explore 5 aspects that support reimagining student engagement as a partnership. And then lastly, we're going to get you up and going. We're going to get you experiencing engagement strategies that can be used in the classroom if you're a classroom teacher, at staff meetings if you're a site or district admin, or in professional learning situations if that is your role. So hopefully there will be something for everyone. Just to get an idea of these activities, 1, 2, or 3, if I could get you to hold up, which one are you most interested in doing today? Hold up your fingers, 1, 2, or 3, or drop it in the chat if you are in person. Okay, I see a good variety. I see 3. Okay, excellent. That means I will go through our slides to make sure I get to the end and make sure that's not the part that I leave out when I run out of time. Fantastic. I also saw some 2s. I saw some 1s. Great. All right, and then if we're thinking about our targets today, really what we're going to be doing is talking about the role that engagement can play in learning acceleration. We're going to talk about how to identify those strengths from both educators and students and what they bring to engagement to help improve instructional practices. I'm going to be showing you some ways that we collected some street data around student engagement at a particular site to move the student learning forward using data decision making. And then also, I hope that you leave with some practical tools that you can use. So that is what we are looking for today. You may or may not have heard this already here, but learning acceleration is really about shifting your mindset. It shouldn't necessarily be one additional thing that you do. It's how you think about what you're already doing. And Susie Pepper Rollins, in her book, Learning in the Fast Lane, talked about that in order to, for students to reach their potential, their teachers need to shift, or their educators need to shift that mindset to help support their learning. So that's what we're going to be thinking about today. All right. So I realize that there have been some other sessions around engagement here at our summit. And so just to help my understanding, I'm going to ask you to do a fist to 5 or a 1 to 5 in the chat of your knowledge about Amy Berry's continuum of engagement. If you are like, who is Amy Berry and what is this continuum? That's going to be a 0. If you are like, Karen, give me the mic and let me tell you everything I know about Amy Berry's continuum of engagement, that's going to be a 5. Okay, so I'm going to ask you fist to 5 or 1 to 5 or 0 to 5 in the chat. What's your understanding or knowledge around this continuum of engagement? Okay. All right.
Many zeros.
Many zeros in the chat. Excellent. All right. Okay, well then we are going to get rolling into this. All right. So student engagement, when I was in my teacher credential program, I really understood engagement to be that students are engaged. And for those students who are engaged, they're going to most likely learn more and do better in school. And then on the other side, you have students who are disengaged. Traditionally, those are going to be students that struggle more. That was how I understood it. But really, when we look at engagement, there's so much more that's happening underneath the surface. There's really a lot more to disengagement, and there's so much more to engagement, and that's what we're going to be exploring today. So in 2020, Amy Berry, she's a researcher out of Australia, started to look at engagement and wanted to know what teachers thought about student engagement. So she went around and interviewed teachers, and what she found in her research was that teachers pretty much put engagement into these 6 categories. So if you would like to look at this more closely, it is the inside of your folder. If you take your materials out, it's a larger version. You also have a smaller version in your note catcher as well. But basically, the way that she created her continuum is that it falls into 6 categories. 3 on the left, which are around disengagement, and that is disrupting, avoiding, and withdrawing. There are 3 on the right around engagement, and those are participating, investing, and driving. And because this is a continuum, it moves back and forth, and you'll notice that at the top, we have passive engagement in the middle 2 columns around withdrawing and participating. We have active engagement on either end of this continuum. You will also notice that this particular continuum is divided. On the top, those descriptors have to do with how students engage in an activity. So some sort of task that they're asked to do. On the bottom part, this is how students are engaging with their peers in the classroom, that sort of thing. And then within each category, those are the descriptors that you would see if students were participating in an activity or working with their peers. These are the kind of things that you will see. If they're at the participating level, they're doing their work, they're paying attention, they're responding to questions. So that's how this is laid out. I'm going to give you about 2 to 3 minutes, and I want you to, with your table group, and if you're sitting alone, I invite you, if you would like to sit with somebody else during the activity, you are welcome to do that. If you prefer to learn on your own, that is absolutely fine as well. I'd like you to just think about, what do you notice? What do you wonder about this continuum? What questions come up as you look it over? Same thing in the for your virtual participants. If you want to jot down what you notice and wonder, please put that in the chat for us. We would love to hear your thoughts. Okay. All right, I'm going to pull you back together. Would anybody like to share a noticing or wondering that came up in your conversation? We had a virtual share. Yes.
Yes, actually, there were quite a few comments in the chat here. I think that they can hear me.
They can't hear you.
I unmuted.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Very good, thank you. So, Eloina Trujillo, she said, I noticed that even though green means that students are participating, many of us would think that's good enough. But to truly have them engaged, the students need to be invested in driving the academic discourse. That is the optimal form of engagement. We have another one. I noticed that a student can be actively engaged and actively disengaged. I usually thought of disengagement as passivity. I wonder where students would place themselves on the continuum. So those are some. There were lots of thoughts, but I'll share the floor.
Other noticing or
Thank you.
wonderings?
We talked a little bit about the fine line between withdrawing and participating, and that when we're thinking about our students or learners, wherever the environment might be, is how do we facilitate an engaging learning environment in that, which then begins also with one of the challenges could be is planning, planning and having the time to plan an engaging lesson or amount of time for students. So thinking of it in a teacher's lens. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, one more.
Hi. Joseph and I were talking about how this really relates to another layer, which is self-regulation, and using this with students. But one thing I think Joseph pointed out that really resonated with me is, I think we can think of a lot of students that are in this disengagement area, and we want them to just go all the way to the right into investing in driving. And I think as teachers, we have to think maybe we have to just get them to that next step to the right. A lot of teachers just think they just need to be here all the way, but they can't. We have to figure out how to work with self-regulation to move them slowly to the right.
Fantastic. Well, you have all made all of my points for the entire session. So I'd like to thank you for coming. No, such great insight that you all had. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, all of the things that you talked about where this idea that active disengagement is a thing. It's not just a passive activity. One of the things I want to expand on this idea of participating. We talked about participating. We've all had those days, right, where you would give anything, if students were doing their work, paying attention, and responding to questions. That's the goal, right? I know when I was in the classroom, days are hard, and that was the goal for me. But if we're really thinking about how we accelerate learning for students, one of our virtual participants said, if we want to get to that investing and driving and accelerate their learning, we have to get them to be more actively engaged and move them along that continuum. And yes, they're not going to be at driving all the time. All of you, probably over the last 2 days, at one point or another, I'm going to say that you probably haven't been disrupting, but there are probably times when you've been withdrawing and you're like, I'm just going to sit and listen. It's okay. Or you're participating, or you're so excited about something, you're raising your hand and sharing. And so we all move within this continuum. That's what makes it a continuum. One of the reasons that we've chose to focus our work a lot on this is because one of the things, as you'll see a little bit later on when I get to that portion of it, this gives vocabulary and a shared goal for students and teachers, for staff and their administrators. Sometimes we think that students understand what we mean by student engagement, but they might not know what it means to be engaged. And this is a way to give words to what they were saying. I heard in the back having sentence frames up for students to give them the language to share how they're feeling is a great thing. Now, one of the things I want to caution of is thinking in maybe past practice around student engagement. We've had the clip up, clip down charts, and we want to make sure that this is not how we're using this continuum. This continuum is really about students reflecting where they are on the continuum and thinking about how to move either in one direction or the other. And as you mentioned, becoming self-regulated and self-aware of what's happening. We want to try to avoid teachers saying, oh, you're doing this right now, and giving the student their opinion of where they are. Okay, so we're going to talk. I could spend the whole time talking about this continuum, but I know that many of you were interested in our third activity today, so I'm going to move us forward. We have a video to share. Doug Fisher was kind enough to share this video with us, and it shows a teacher introducing the continuum of engagement. When you get the slide deck, there's also another video. This particular example is in high school. There's also an example of elementary students talking about each level of engagement that really speaks to the power of students having the vocabulary to share how they're feeling and where they are on the continuum. So those are both available to you. For time reasons, we're not going to go into both.
You need to self-regulate the teacher. Control your work. You have to write something. And then you finish writing. You want to ask someone for the feedback to see if it's perfect. You want to see the opinion on your writing. Like me, you're making a goal. I was participating in the regional multiply, and I was correcting the answers if I was wrong or right, because my teacher, when I do a test, sometimes he gives you a second chance to write it again. My typical level of engagement is participating in investing, because I do all my work like this. Like last week, I pay attention to grammar, and I did it. Paying attention, I pay attention to my teachers yesterday and today. Responding to questions, I answer my teacher's questions, and asking questions. I ask questions that I'm not really sure about, and feeling like what you are learning is important. Like if you're feeling, you can feel like reading what you're learning, and reading is important because that's a big part of your life.
All right. We love technology. So remember what I said about how it was a class introducing. That's the video that you're going to share, that you're going to see on the slide deck when you get back. So we only saw 3 levels of engagement there for time purposes, but the video, the whole video has all the levels of engagement as well. All right, we're going to be doing another activity. So my in-person participants, you're going to see a yellow index card on your table. My virtual participants, you are going to each grab a slide on your activity slide deck, starting after slide 8. On one side of the card or slide, you are going to write one insight that you had about the continuum. On the other side of the card, you're going to write one question. Okay, so for the virtual participants, you're going to write on one side of your slide, you're going to write down your insight. On the other side of the slide, you're going to write down your question. A question you might still have about it. Maybe it could be a way it's used. think about 1 more minute. All right, this will be an opportunity for you to get up. If you are at home, feel free to stand up while you do this. But we are going to get into a circle. And while the camera's not faced at it, I think the best place for it, I don't think all 15 of us will fit up here. So we're going to go in the back there, and I'm going to ask you to get into a circle. If you are a virtual participant, you are going to be looking at the slides that all of your colleagues just completed on your activity slide deck, but don't scroll yet. I'd like you to just pick, actually, I'm gonna have you start at your own slide. So if you're a virtual participant, I'm gonna ask you to go to your own slide. Oh, we have our tech genius that's gonna make us be able to see this. Fantastic. All right, you're gonna, you can get a little bit closer together because you're gonna be passing. All right, this is going to be the hardest part of the day. Here we go. We are all going to pass our cards 3 times to the left. Every group has to count out loud. I love it. Okay, I would like you to take a moment and read the insight and the question that you were just handed. All right, now you are going to pass it 2 times to the left. All right, please read your new card. My virtual participants, I would like you to start at your slide. You're going to count down the amount of times that we pass our cards. So if you haven't already, count down 2 slides. If you get to the bottom, you can go back up to the top. I'm going to invite you to read the slide of the colleague that you land on. All right. In-person and virtual participants, I'm going to ask you to pass to the left or scroll down 3 times, please. And you're going to read that card. All right. Once you have read your card, I'm going to ask you to pass it to Joseph, who is in the leather jacket. Pass your card to Joseph and find your seat, please. All right. Virtual participants, if you didn't get a chance to read more than 1 slide, feel free to scroll through the slides, and we're going to head back to where we were. So again, because I am trying to be super cognizant to get to that 3rd activity, I want to make sure I'm going to go a little bit faster through this. Normally, either standing in the back or at our tables, we would have a group discussion about what you read in the cards that you read, if you noticed any similarities or differences, and then I would invite you to write some sort of insight on your note catcher. But because we're moving on, so we just did notice and wonder. The last activity that we did is the IQ card, and you saw it could be done virtually or in person. This is a great activity when you introduce something to students or to your staff, and you're trying to find out information. So what I just got was a fantastic formative assessment about what questions you all have that I did not cover about the continuum, so that next time I can make sure to cover those things. It also is a way that you can anonymously share how it's going. So it's a great activity for both students and adults to get information about how they're seeing the information that they're learning. It does take some time. And so what I'd like you to do right now is we're going to check in, and I want you on a scale of 0 to 10 to think about how engaged you are right now. And what do you need to get to the next number? As one of our colleagues shared today, you don't have to be at a 10. If you're at a 2, that's okay. What is it going to take to get you to a 3? Maybe it's your maybe it's your facilitator showing more enthusiasm. That was one of the things that was on the finding challenging to stay engaged. Maybe we need to be moving at a perkier pace. Maybe there's something new that you're grappling with, and that is what's getting in the way. So it can be lots of different things, but it's just an opportunity to check in and see how we're doing. All right. This is going to be the fastest that I have ever done this, and I'm going to invite you to come back for Summit 26 to watch me do a whole presentation on engagement as a partnership, because that is probably how long it would do this. But here's my best version of it that I can get done in the time that we have. When I went to my teacher credential program, what I learned was it is my responsibility as a teacher to create a lesson that is engaging so that students will learn. What I have learned through this work is that if we want that to happen, if that happens, if it's only my responsibility, engagement turns into a battlefield where there's winners and losers, and the students and I get into power struggles about what they're going to do, what they're not going to do, and how it's going to work. If we want students to accelerate their learning, and if we want students to be engaged, it has to be a partnership, which means that they have just as an important role as we have as educators about being engaged. And so in Amy Berry's work, she talks about these 5 components. And again, I could spend an entire session just talking about these 5 components. The first one is around creating a culture of engagement. When we saw that continuum, on the top, it talked about activities like asking questions, setting goals. If we want to create this culture of engagement, we have to provide opportunities in our activities and in our engagement for students to be able to do that. Sometimes with a culture of engagement, what can be challenging about that is that there are some students that have gotten so used to the norms of school that they have failed so many times that they're afraid to try again because they don't want to fail one more time. And so they resist that culture of engagement. If you have other students that are so good at the game of school that they can do it with a minimum amount of effort. And if we talk about creating this culture of engagement, they're going to have to put in more effort. So even those students that are normally high achieving students might resist this idea of being challenged in that investing and driving area because they haven't had to put a lot of effort into their education this far. So the last thing I'm going to say about creating a culture of engagement, and I want you to just think about and reflect right now on an answer that you might give to one of these questions. What does it mean to be a good learner? What does it mean to be a successful learner at school? You can read them up there, but if we think about these questions and our answers to them, my question to you is, what would your students say the answers to this question are? Because they might have a completely different idea about what a successful learner is at school. And so if you are not on the same page, there is no way that you can create this culture of engagement. As a leader, if you are a leader, I would say You could also say, what does it mean to be a successful teacher at this school? Do you and your teachers, you and your educators, if you're a coach, do you and the people that you coach have the same ideas about what you're working towards? I invite you to create this dialogue because that helps create this culture of engagement. The second one talks about designing learning experiences that optimize engagement. I alluded to this a little bit earlier. In the activities that we do, if you look at that engagement continuum, and you'll notice that it talks about sharing ideas and thinking with peers and collaborating and challenging each other to drive improvement. If we do not have opportunities for students to work with peers in our lessons and tasks that we give, there is no way that they're going to get to those levels on the engagement continuum. So it's thinking about just being mindful about that. Okay. I know this is so fast. I'm so sorry. The next one, the third component, is around energizing students' inner motivational resources. And what self-determination theory tells us is that we as human beings, and this is every human being, have three basic needs that need to be met. The first one is around competence. This is saying we all love to extend ourselves out to a challenge, feel like we can accomplish it, and then celebrate when we have accomplished it. If we never feel success on something, we don't want to keep doing it. If it becomes too easy, then that's not engaging either. And so I call this the Goldilocks principle because as educators and as leaders, we have to find that just right area of what's going to challenge them, but not deter them. And that is a very tricky fine line to walk. The second one has to do with autonomy. People, humans, we like to feel like we are in control. Teachers, probably more than anybody else that I've ever met, myself included. We like to feel like we are in control of our own life. Students are the same way. They like to feel like they have student voice in what's happening at school. And the last one is relatedness. Yesterday we had Nancy Fry and Doug Fisher here, and they share probably at every training that I've ever been at is that the effect size of the student-teacher relationship is 0.62, meaning that the relationship at any age of student that students have with their teachers can have up to a year and a half worth of growth for a year of learning if they believe that someone cares about them and they believe that they belong in school. And so if those three needs are met, we will be energizing students' intermotivational resources. The fourth one focuses in on this autonomy piece a little bit more. Now, on your note catcher, you have a little spot where you can mark down if you think it is you're going to give an opportunity to give a choice. Again, because of time, we're going to just move through that part. And I'm just going to share with you that John Marshall Reeve in 2009 and then again in 2016 did a little bit of research and found that in general, learning environments had two specific, it was again a continuum with two sides to that continuum. The first one being more autonomy supportive, which as we just learned from our self-determination theory, we as humans love that autonomy supportive. We like to feel like we're in control. The other side of that being more controlling. And we, we all know in our classrooms and in our educational settings, there are times where both of these things are happening. There are times when students are in control and feel like they're in control of their learning. And there are times that teachers will tend to be a little bit more controlling. I'm going to invite you, and again, this is on your slide deck, so we don't have to, you don't have to race to put in the right answers just yet. But when we're looking at the different aspects of an autonomy supportive environment versus an autonomy controlling environment, if we want students to feel like they are partners in this work with us, we need to be able to take their perspectives. We need to be able to ignite their curiosity, their interests. We need to be able to explain the value in what they're learning. Offering choices is really helpful. Acknowledging and accepting that there will be negative responses sometimes. Not to dwell there, but know that they're there and that's okay. And then also being patient and allowing students to work at their own pace in their own way lead to that more of a autonomy supportive environment that will allow students to feel more like partners. Okay, and our last one, the fifth component of student as a partnership is this misconception that we only have to engage the students that need support or need help, when in reality, we have to engage all of our students. The goal is to maximize engagement for all students. Those high achieving students need to be pushed to that investing and driving just as much as our students that need more support just to get to participating. Okay. We were also going to do a ranking activity where you got the opportunity to put these in order from what you thought was the most immediate to address or the least immediate to address. I'm running out of time and I really want to get to this third part. So let me share why we focused on engagement. Because I am sure that over the last 2 days, you have heard that learning acceleration is about evidence-based strategies that meet students' needs around priority content using UDL, culturally sustaining pedagogy, and social emotional practices in their learning. And all of that is true, but you can use the best evidence-based strategies around, and if students are not engaged, it will not matter. And so this has been the focus of our work around at Mary Casey Black Elementary School. It's a school in the East Bay area, and it is a TK through 5th grade school. And we went in and did some learning around what students thought about engagement. We asked them how often they were interested. We asked kindergarten all the way to 5th grade students how often they were interested in the lesson their teacher was teaching. As you can see, they all knew the right answer, which was sometimes or most or all of the time. They were never not interested. When we got to how often are you distracted or avoiding your work, you can see that it was a little bit more even distribution around they were never distracted or most or all of the time they were distracted or sometimes. We also looked at what the teachers thought about engagement because again, we wanted to make sure that we had that voice and that they were working on the same page. And the teachers, when we consolidated all their data, they fell into these 4 categories: active participation, collaboration and interaction, engagement indicators, and the teacher's roles. And what we found was that they had similar ideas about what engagement was, and it did not match what the students thought it was. When we asked students about engagement, a huge percentage said, I have no idea. The second biggest category was around that it had something to do with marriage or divorce, and that was it. And some thought it was about helping, others thought there was like a very small percentage that thought it was around learning, and then there were some outlying answers as well. But these were the top 4 categories. And what we realized is that we were talking about all this engagement, but this school the kids had no idea what we were asking and what we were expecting. And so what we decided to do was gather some baseline data about where we started. So we took the indicators on the continuum and the categories, and we created this walkthrough tool, which you have either on your Google Drive or in your folder. And there are 2 versions of this walkthrough tool. The first one is this one, which all fits on one page. And what we did with the principal, the vice principal, Kristen and myself, and then 2 teachers, was we went around to the classrooms and we just did tally marks. we marked where every kid in the classroom was at that particular moment with just tally marks, and we added up all the information to see what we would find. The other tool that you'll find in your folder, as well as in the Google folder, is one that's on where we've divided the engagement in the activity on one side and engaging with the peers on the other. And that tool was designed to be more of like anecdotal information about what the kids were doing. So you might need more room than the tally marks. So what we found was this. A huge percentage at each grade level was in participating. Woohoo! We were excited. Like, that's great. There's not a lot of disrupting, there's not a lot of avoiding. And what we know is, as the lowest performing school in this particular district, participating is not going to make our student outcomes any better. They need to get to that investing and driving. And so this was the start of our work together. Now, what I wanted to tell you, so we started, after we got this data, what we started to do was do professional learning around the engagement continuum, activities that the teachers can do. We talked with the principals and did some planning. And what we found, and we just did this week walkthroughs again to collect new information. Unfortunately, I was not able to calculate it before I got here, but what we did find was that teachers were starting to get their students to self-reflect on their engagement. And so engagement posters were put up, continuums like the one that you see here, were put up in all the classrooms, and teachers did some introductory lessons. This particular teacher chose to, at the end of each activity, have students rate themselves, and on this particular day, he collected the index cards, rate themselves on where they thought they were on the continuum, but then they also rated the group. And so here was a student that typically struggles. Obviously, it's a fifth grader, not necessarily fifth grade complex sentence, but he was able to say, I was investing because I was paying attention and we were sharing ideas as a group. They're able to say, these students are now able to say where they are and cite evidence, which can then lead to content areas because now they know how to cite the evidence for what they're doing. So we were so excited when we saw this activity happening at the end of particular group work. And so the next thing that we did was we decided to create a vision of what engagement would look like. And so with the school's leadership team, we took them through this 4-step process to develop a school vision, which you have as well. They developed their teacher version of their school vision and then a kid-friendly version. We put that out to the staff and students, and we're currently collecting feedback on how that's going. And so as we close up today, what I wanted to share was that several of the activities that were planned and that we also did came from this book called Total Participation Techniques. It's a great book because it has many resources. You can use these engagement activities with adults, students, anybody. Again, you have the slide deck, so you can come back to this. And you've heard about, I'm sure, some of our learning acceleration opportunities. And as we close out today, I'm just going to ask you to think about something you heard today that maybe how you felt, maybe a new idea that you gained, maybe something, if you heard something from somebody else. Or I'm going to ask you to think about a new idea. Yes. Yes, for sure. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And with that, I want to thank you. I promise next time I will put less content in, but I was excited to share all of this with you. We appreciate your feedback. And if you have any questions, my email is at the top of the note catcher. You are welcome to email me. I'd love to talk to you about all things engagement. And don't forget, our general session is going to be downstairs in the main building. We have some Ignite presentations. And so thank you so much for coming. Hope you had a fantastic summit.